Welcome to Urban Legends, and in tonight's video, we'll discover just how an everyday woman named Clara Crane took a dark path to become the terrifying Candy Lady of Texas. In 1871, Clara Crane was born in the city of Terrell, 30 miles east of Dallas. When she was an adult, she married a man called Leonard and they lived a simple farming life together. Clara eventually had a daughter, named Marcella, who she adored, and for a long time, they were happy. In 1893, however, tragedy struck. Marcella was involved in a farming accident. Leonard was supposed to be supervising, but he had been drinking. Unfortunately, due to her injuries, Marcella could not be saved and passed away. Clara was obviously distraught, and over time she became despondent and withdrawn, resenting Leonard for Marcella's tragic death. Things became progressively worse, and finally she just couldn't take it anymore. It was 2 years later when she snapped and decided to get revenge on her husband. She waited until Leonard had drunk his daily quota of beers and fallen asleep on the couch before she began. Clara moved into the kitchen and took out the ingredients to make caramel candies from scratch. They were, after all, her husband's favorite, but on this particular night, she added an extra ingredient, which was poison. Once they were ready, she carried them in on a tray and nudged Leonard, who woke with a start, and then quickly ate all of the caramel candies. The poison was quick to act, and soon Clara's husband was no more. The following day, Clara's neighbor witnessed Clara pacing around her property, shouting and hitting herself. The neighbor went outside and tried to comfort Clara, but she was frenzied and violent, screaming about her husband's body inside the house and how it wouldn't move anymore. The neighbor was very disturbed and called the police. Sometime later, County Sheriff Fred Springer arrived at the house and found Clara to be extremely aggressive towards him and his men. After the sheriff discovered what had become of Leonard, Clara was promptly arrested and taken into custody. She was quickly tried and faced a charge of first-degree murder. Clara pleaded insanity, and due to the extreme circumstances of both her past and her crime, she was placed in the North Texas Lunatic Asylum, which later became Terrell State Hospital. As the years passed inside the asylum, Clara kept to herself and was known for being quiet, polite, and softly spoken. She made a doll from torn bed sheets that she would talk to and sing to at night. In letters written to her sister Aggie, Clara would often refer to Marcy being locked up with her, and in time, the fellow patients at the asylum gave her the nickname the Candy Lady when they became aware of how she had taken revenge on her husband. Luckily for Clara, in 1899, a small quota of prisoners were being rounded up for early release due to overcrowding. Even though she'd committed first-degree murder, the fact that she was gentle and softly spoken made her a very good candidate for release in those days. Clara traveled back to Terrell, and after visiting her old home, which was now dilapidated, she took up residence in a small isolated house on cheap land. She appeared much older than her years, so much so that the few people she passed in town would have never guessed that it was her. The adjustment away from the hospital and the strict routines they followed there came with unease and unrest. The dramatic change in her life plunged Clara into an even deeper state of despair, and she stayed that way for a long time. But years later, something very disturbing began to happen in Terrell. Some of the local children would wake up in the morning to find candy left on their windowsills. It hadn't been there before they went to bed, but it was certainly there the next day. And they found that if they ate it, sure enough, the next day there would be a fresh pile waiting for them. It tasted especially good, and they didn't want to tell their parents in case they tried to stop whoever this was. After a few months, there were little notes found inside the wrappers. They said happy quotes and were signed by somebody who called herself the Candy Lady. It wasn't long before the first child went missing. Neither the law enforcement nor the grief-stricken parents had any idea about the candies that had been left as a present for their child. It was unusual for this kind of thing to happen in Terrell, and soon, another vanished without trace. One morning while cutting back some foliage at the border of his land, a farmer found something strange sitting on a fence post. It was a shiny candy wrapper with the farmer's name written on it. He opened it up and saw human teeth inside. After this incident, the police and local residents put on even more searches, and they soon found a body which was surrounded by candy wrappers. News of this traveled like a wave through the town, and children began to tell their parents that they had been receiving candy for months. Some even told of an old lady who they could see outside their windows at night, singing softly as she prepared the treats. Most of the townspeople began to scrutinize its sheriff, wanting quick justice with the culprit of these heinous crimes caught. Sheriff Reynolds put in extra shifts and would often wander the fields and farmland, looking for clues. And one evening, he found what he was looking for. It was a cold night, and just as he had come to some crossroads, he found candy wrappers on the floor, spaced about 6 feet apart in a line. He followed the trail for over 100 feet, all the way to where it stopped, which was at the edge of a thicket of trees. He was anxious to catch the perpetrator and drew his revolver in preparation to make the arrest, when he heard a woman laughing behind him. The sheriff turned quickly but could only make out an old lady's face for a split second, before she hit him with a shovel and he fell down, unconscious. The next day, the lifeless body of Sheriff Reynolds was found face down in a ditch. His pockets were stuffed with candy and he had some trauma to his head, especially the eyes. Some theorized that it was because he saw her that he paid such a high price. The candy lady was never caught. Even those who made the link to Clara Crane had no luck in finding her, as she'd abandoned the small house that she lived in, presumably living wild in the forest. Although things gradually became quiet and sterile over time, every once in a while, somebody would vanish in the night, and it was thought to be the work of the candy lady. In modern times, the legend of Clara Crane, also known as the Candy Lady, is still very much alive and is sometimes told to children, usually to get them to behave, stop them taking candy from strangers, or scare them into not straying too far from the house. Although certain parts of the legend seem plausible, such as Clara's backstory and incarceration, there are no historical records or credible sources that confirm the existence of either Clara Crane nor any of the events described in the legend. The story itself has many elements typical of urban legends, such as mysterious disappearances and a sinister figure who comes at night, which are often exaggerated or fabricated to make the story even scarier. Also, there are no documented cases of children going missing in the manner described in the legend. Such tragic events would surely leave their mark on the community. Having said that, there are those who believe that every legend is based partly on truth and that the Candy Lady was a real person, who still might be out there somewhere, waiting to leave her treats on your windowsill. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time for more urban legends.